Hi, everyone, and welcome to another really exciting episode of Voice Out Wednesdays on Voice of Crypto. The rapidly evolving tech landscape has been really exciting of late, and because of this, we get guests from the Web3, blockchain, crypto, and the emerging technology space. Today, we have with us Collin Woodward, the president and the general counsel of StealthTest by Nameless. And I'm your host for the day, Varuni. And today we will delve into the world of security and privacy in the realm of Web3 and blockchain. With his extensive experience and expertise, Colin is here to shed light on the crucial intersection of technology, security, and regulation. So let's jump right in. But before that, hi, Colin. We're really excited to have you on our podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Varuni. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today. Before we start, could you shed some light on the most important question that we face in today's world, which is why security and privacy are paramount in the Web3 ecosystem, and how does Stealth Test contribute to sort of maintaining that balance in this landscape?
Sure. So security and privacy are kind of cornerstones of the legacy Web 2 systems, right? Most large enterprise companies all have, kind of compliance and security and privacy measures in place. When they go about doing their day-to-day business, just kind of from an annual perspective. And Web 3, so far to this point, we've kind of endured some growing pains, I think, as an interesting industry. However, going forward, we will inevitably adopt very similar kind of approaches to doing business, right? And so, on the privacy point in particular, the big thing to note here is that the underlying technology that we're dealing with, public blockchains, especially permissionless public blockchains, are immutable, right? So once any kind of data, for example, a smart contract or a token asset, is deployed to a blockchain, that data is permanent. You can't take it back, right? Which also makes any errors or oversights that might be associated with the smart contracts or the token assets permanent as well. So it's really critical to find ways to mitigate the risks of not having any of these errors whatsoever. And that's really kind of the key to success in Web3. So what we do as a company, StealthTest, is we provide private sandboxes, these solutions to allow builders to experiment in private without the risk of, having to compromise their public reputations, or, kind of run afoul of kind of internal procedures, right? And on kind of the second component with security, for leading enterprise companies in Web3, really what's going to be of extreme value to them is ways to package up and conceal their proprietary data and their intellectual property, right? They don't want the public knowing about what they're working on before they're ready to announce it to the public, right? They want to make sure that all of that information, all of their well-laid plans are kind of kept under wraps until they're ready to do the big reveal, right? And so this kind of security and privacy is going to be, I think, both a technical and a legal requirement for any company, small or large, getting into Web3 here. And especially for the large enterprise companies, their reputation is largely built upon goodwill, built up over time by having lots of really engaging, successful experiences with their consumers and their clients, right? And they can't afford to have a bad project, a bad drop go bad. Okay. And so that's really what kind of keeps the integrity of their brand identity, their public goodwill, their customer loyalty, everything across the board there. And so kind of the net here is that ensuring that these brand assets and that all associated intellectual property for large enterprise companies is protected, is really kind of the key to getting large enterprise companies truly engaged in Web3 right now.
Absolutely. I was reading that Stealth Test's mission is to revolutionize software testing, at the same time prioritizing security and compliance. And how do you go hand in hand with those two things, and how do you envision the revolution that is going to impact businesses and projects operating within the Web3 environment going forward?
Sure. So, you might find me repeating myself a bit here because I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we as a Web3 industry mature to kind of the standards that Web2 has set, especially in terms of security and privacy and compliance, right? Because again, these stakeholders that are part of the large enterprise companies, we're talking Fortune 500, they're just not going to get involved in an industry that doesn't have kind of comparable channels for ensuring that you know that they can go out and experiment freely without the consequence of perhaps ruining the company's reputation, risking their own jobs individually, right? And any kind of financial consequences that might be associated with launching a project that goes bad. And we've seen many instances of those, unfortunately. So really what we're trying to do here at StealthTest is bring this traditional concept in Web 2 of the build, test, deploy software development framework into Web 3, right? So typically, just to kind of give you a quick overview of this, the building process would be, the development of the associated smart contracts, right? Of the UI and the UX associated with the project, right? The testing is that middle lane of the highway, so to speak, that we currently operate in. And we provide these private testing environments for folks to then take the things that they've built, put them into our private testing environments, and they can analyze their smart contracts for any kind of errors and exploits. They can verify the accuracy of the metadata associated with any tokens, right? If it's some sort of a token related project, and they can make sure that they don't have any deployment errors that might kind of arise before they launch to a public mainnet and kind of reveal everything that they've been working on. So this build, test, deploy framework is really kind of crucial for us. We're strong proponents of it, and it's really kind of formed the bedrock, the ethos of what we're doing here. And just to kind of circle back here, as this Web3 industry matures, the methodology of the builders in the industry will need to come along with it, right? It must also evolve in order to attract and entice these large enterprise companies to enter the industry and grow the industry collectively, right? That's really kind of what our predominant mission here is. And in this eventual future stage of Web3, where we're all kind of a bit more technologically and procedurally mature, private testing is, again, just a cornerstone of this development process. And I think it will be actually a mandatory part of just the developmental life cycle for companies, whether they're big or small.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. In the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen that blockchain technology has seen a sudden adoption, not just in the private sector, but the public sector as well. A lot of governments banking on the tech to sort of get done with various various things that can lead to infrastructure development as well as in healthcare. Basically, a lot of fields where we are seeing the emergence of blockchain technology being actively used. And now we can't deny that you already touched upon the role of smart contracts, but we can't deny that it is in fact pivotal. Could you elaborate a bit? And I know you already touched upon why developing and testing smart contracts would be key. Uh, how many businesses are already doing it from, let's say, the POV of an insider? And you did mention that eventually it would be, if not compulsory, would be something that businesses would be doing mandatorily. How is smart contract testing looking at this point? And do you see key jumps in this sort of procedure going forward?
Yeah, so I think that frankly, I'm not sure how many folks out there, especially the large enterprise companies that are our primary product market segment, right, are actively building using smart contracts. It's something that typically, they can do in the confines of, their kind of walled off gardens, and the public's not going to know about it unless they make in my opinion, critical mistake of trying to test those smart contracts on a public test net, right? Which is why we offer a private solution, because really once you go out to market, and if you're bold enough to test on a public test net, it's going to leave a footprint, right? A footprint that can't be removed, a footprint that is visible to the general public, right? Especially if there are some, perhaps savvy bad actors out there that are scraping public test nets for information in order to try and front run a big project announcement or drop or something like that to gain a financial edge or some other kind of advantage, right? That's really the main drawback of utilizing a public test net. And our private test nets allow folks to utilize smart contracts, which are really amazing tools, without having to be exposed to kind of like the public vulnerabilities of a test net like Gorley or something similar, right? Now, coming back to your previous question on smart contracts in particular, they're really fantastic tools, right? They can be the foundation for innovative applications, creator economies. It's allowing us as an industry to do really unique things that were not previously possible, outside of these just automated pieces of code that are really kind of revolutionary in a lot of ways. However, at the end of the day, smart contracts are just collections of code written by people. And that code can contain math bugs, bad logic, faulty verifications or no verifications, incorrect permissions, really like any number of other errors or exploits that can put assets or, again, reputations and jobs at risk. So by testing these smart contracts in advance, especially in a private test environment, not on a public test net, these builders can ensure that they're going to have a really successful public launch, and they can identify any errors or exploits or deployment issues beforehand, so that they're not subjected to the public consequences of something going bad.
Absolutely. Now, crypto regulations has been sort of a sensitive topic, not just in the States, but across the globe. And governments have been struggling, so to say, for the lack of a better word, I would say, struggling to understand this new technology, how to go about it. While CBDC adoption is something that a lot of governments are going forward, still adoption, crypto regulation is sort of an uncharted territory for a lot of governments. How do you see security solutions playing an important role in shaping the future of crypto regulations as well as policies? Because there aren't, so to say, fixed policies around something like cryptocurrencies, which aren't governed by nations, borders, but would be more global. So, what sort of a role do you see security solutions, especially private ones? What sort of a role would they play going forward?
Yeah. So this issue of crypto policy and regulation is one that is very near and dear to my heart. Spent quite a bit of time, participating in discussions and helping to work behind the scenes to educate folks on the key issues, and how to intelligently talk about kind of misconceptions around the industry, and really kind of the key legislative pieces that are coming down the pipeline, especially here in the United States, right? However, the entire global economy right now is grappling with this issue of how to regulate this brand new industry and the technology that underlies it, blockchain, right? And especially some of the decentralized finance applications built upon blockchain, because these this new technology just can't be automatically slotted into previous legacy political frameworks, right? Or regulatory frameworks. There's special technical nuances that just don't allow them to match up one to one. And so, you know, what we've seen already is especially impressive from the European Union, right? They passed MiCA, which is a fairly broad regulatory framework for most, but not all, digital assets over there. And I think that's really going to be right now. It is kind of the star of the show, and will be used as a framework by other governments, I think, going forward in just helping them figure out how they can address this technology while not stifling innovation and also protecting the consumers within their borders, right? Those are kind of that's the big dichotomy that we see. I think the UK is next on the horizon to inevitably adopt some form of MiCA, probably, and then the United States has it's been quite a show. I'm sure you've seen. We have lots of really great pieces of legislation that have been proposed, and I think will, through hopefully productive negotiations and discussions, will eventually find their way to the president's desk for signature, whether it be this president currently or the next president. That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But I think that we're kind of at the point right now where education still remains critical, and banding together as an industry is really paramount, because as an industry we need to make our voices heard and let our policymakers, especially those within the states within which we reside, know that these issues are important to us, and when it comes time to go to the polls and vote, we're going to vote in line with our interests, as most people do. So that's kind of the current state of regulation, I would say. And on the security aspect in particular, this is something that we have heard from all different instances of congressional hearings around crypto time and time again. Now, the security issue has come up in various different forms, right? Not just kind of the software development kind of life cycle that is applicable to StealthTest, right? But more often, it relates to the various hacks that occur, right? Obviously, the protection of private keys in blockchain is really critical, and that's something that all sorts of folks struggle to get a handle on, and struggle to create the proper channels to make sure that assets can't be accessed without all the proper authorizations. And I think that at least Congress here in the US is looking for various or assurances or kind of solutions to making sure that security is one of those really important things that's considered along with consumer protection once, I should say, during the process of developing this regulatory framework.
Absolutely. And fingers crossed for an optimistic future for the Web3 and crypto space. I must say, Colin, that your involvement in the US regulatory policy and initiatives is pretty impressive. If you had to discuss a few initiatives that are shaping Web3 landscape and sort of influencing how businesses approach privacy and security, what would they be?
That's a great question. Let's see. I would say that right now, some of the biggest regulatory and policy initiatives, kind of at the forefront of this industry, largely relate to how we can mitigate an increase in bad actors entering the space, or at least holding those bad actors accountable, right? and making sure that they can't continue to, you know, operate their charades and harm consumers, harm investors, harm the general public. I think
Mhm.
that's something that we've seen time and time again from the certainly the DOJ, who's been
Mhm.
really kind of at the front of this, and it's been a huge emphasis by leaders in Congress as well throughout the many hearings that we've seen over the past several months. So I think that's really the narrative that has taken a hold in the majority of the House and the Senate right now is how to make sure that these bad actors can't continue to operate unfettered and they're held accountable. And if they reside outside the U.S. and they've harmed U.S. citizens, right, that perhaps you know the government can find ways to make them accountable here on American soil via extraditions, via other mechanisms, right? And I think we've already seen that quite a few times. And I think that the DOJ is not going to be is not going to let off the gas pedal on this. So
Mhm. I'm sure with the emerging technologies like blockchain, crypto, even generative AI, the government and regulators are having their fair share of issues understanding how people are able to react to these technologies. However, Colin, with your legal background, you are uniquely positioned to address the intersection of technology and regulation. And this is one space that is sort of confusing, largely for the general public. If you could provide certain examples of how effective advocacy effort by the private side has led to positive outcome for the Web3 industry security standards, what would they be?
that's a great question. I think I can answer it more broadly outside of the security specific kind of
Mhm.
segment of Web3, but like some of the best regulatory and policy advocacy that I've seen has come from to date Polygon and Coinbase, right? Polygon has developed this use case framework that's really genius, and the head of this initiative, Rebecca Reddick over at Polygon, has developed this database uh, of of hundreds of different companies that have responded, and if not thousands, and kind of describe the use cases of the software, the applications that they're building in Web3, and how it can really serve an important purpose for the future of this technology and this industry outside of just like the common financial operations and use cases that we are all very familiar with and have grown to know over the previous years, right? So while this technology was founded on these really kind of innovative financial use cases, it goes far beyond that, right? And it goes far beyond that for large enterprise companies too that want to enter this space, right? And begin to develop strategic Web3 initiatives that bring really creative, customer loyalty or customer rewards programs to market, like what Starbucks has done, right? And or new ways to engage with their consumer base, like what Nike has done. These are two really great examples that of these large enterprise companies that have just continued to lead the way, despite all of the noise and the kind of the tumultuous background of the clash of Web3 with policymakers. So very impressive to see. And Coinbase, they have um, they have really demonstrated a grit that is highly commendable. Whether it's combating the overreach of regulatory agencies like the SEC, um, or other kind of instances where their products have been unfairly, I think, treated in the eyes of regulators and policymakers. They've really shown a resiliency and an ingenuity to kind of fight the good fight and win these important battles on a monthly basis. So.
Absolutely. And these are two very recent examples as well. One thing that I feel differentiates Web 2 from Web 3 is the kind of collaboration that we see, not just cross brands, but sort of competitors partnering and collaborating, and just these mergers of communities happening in the Web 3 space. And I was seeing that StealthTest has partnered with industry giants like Chainlink, Certic, and so on. Can you share some insights, if not all, into how these partnerships worked, and how has this impacted development and adoption of the technology? How we collaborate in this space?
Sure. So, key collaborations and partnerships like this are really important on an industry-wide basis, because I think we are much as the Web 2 industry eventually did, as it began to kind of grow and then eventually consolidate. I think we're going to see something similar in Web 3, right? Where eventually, if we do want to get these everyone on board in Web3, not just large enterprise companies, we're going to need to be able to provide a consolidated developmental stack experience of some sort, right? And by initiating these partnerships, these collaborations, right? These fundamental kind of building block companies like what we do, and with others like Certic and Chainlink, we can begin to develop these mutual channels to then go out to market and provide, a packaged form of full stack tools that, large companies can use. And they don't have to kind of go out to market and find each and every piece that they need, right? Now, on the Gary V, I'll just share a quick bit of background about Gary V. He's obviously one of our biggest investors, and he is also kind of his VFriends project was actually the inspiration behind StealthTest to begin with. So when we initially set out to build a security and privacy focused solution, prior to that, we were actually kind of experimenting with NFT minting solutions and smart contract development services. And Gary V was one of our early customers, and we helped develop his VFriends project. And during that process, we realized like Gary had hand drawn all of these, these thousands of like characters and everything. This is the foundation of his proprietary data, his intellectual property, right? Each and every one of these drawings would be the foundation for this brand, this new digital brand that he wanted to build. What we found that we could not do is put these assets on a public test net in order to test the project before it went live. And so what we had to do was we had to spin up an isolated, Ethereum node in order to privatize this testing experience so that we could make sure that we didn't have, any exploits, that the project launch wasn't going to go bad. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for us, where we realized like, hey, this is something that's extremely valuable, and that, any reputable builder is going to want and need. And so that was kind of the impetus, the catalyst for us moving forward with this solution. So,
Absolutely. Collin, it's hard to deny that data is the most powerful resource in today's time. And with data, a number of data inflowing, intellectual property and sensitive data also becomes sort of this asset that that firms need to safeguard. Could you highlight a few strategies or practices that projects or product owners can employ to protect these assets, especially in the generation that we're living in, with Gen AI sort of taking over, and transparency still being this uncharted arena? What are some practices that you feel firms can adopt while securing intellectual property and sensitive data?
sure. So I think the the blockchain-based answer is a fairly simple one, and aligns very much with our product, which is that don't use a public test net to test your smart contracts, your token assets, because again, the public permissionless blockchains are immutable, and once you put those on there, whether it's mainnet or testnet, it's going to remain there. And so you really need it's essential to have a private testing solution in order to verify that your smart contracts don't have any errors, don't have any vulnerabilities, and your launch is going to go well, right? The AI related answer is I think everyone needs to probably develop a greater focus and interest in the various licensing agreements for a lot of these AI tools, and you should really begin to familiarize yourself with what kind of rights you actually have or don't have by utilizing any kind of AI related tool to develop, whether it's typical copyright material or artistic renditions of certain things, whatever it may be. If you use an AI tool right now, the common result is that there's no copyright or intellectual property protection at all. And so folks should really be aware of that, and should look into the licensing agreements and understand, how they impact what they're creating.
So, being an entrepreneur yourself and an investor, you had a fair share of idea of how investor perspective works. So, how are investors factoring security and privacy measures before they make the decision and go ahead to invest in a certain Web3 or blockchain project? And I believe that you've led a successful funding round yourself. So how does investor decision making sort of affect looking at the compliance, the regulations, as well as security and privacy measures of a firm?
Yeah, I think that in the previous years, I'm not sure that security and privacy in the fundraising and investment side of things really took a center stage. But I think that in the coming years, it certainly will. And I think that most investors will really kind of dig into key issues around, everything from like company security of digital assets, right? Custodial kind of arrangements of digital assets, and all kinds of like policies and procedures that are initiated to make sure that there are safeguards in place, because we've seen lots of instances of the past, unfortunately, year and a half, 2 years, where lots of companies, especially startup companies, have been subjected to instances where a large bank goes under and they can't get access to their funds, or in the instance of the FTX collapse, right, they kept too much of their assets on a centralized exchange and couldn't get those assets out in time. So the internal controls around the holding of all types of investor funds, I think, is going to be really, really central here in the coming years, especially as investors look to kind of receive, perhaps not a guarantee, but an assurance that founders are thinking about these things, and they are going to do everything they can to protect the investment that these investors provide.
Absolutely. So how does Stealth Test sort of maintain itself above the curve and just keep that learning curve growing? Because I'm sure that there are a lot of scalability issues. There's always failure tolerance, and there's a lot of recoverability issues. How do you prioritize all of this while sort of making sure that you're able to secure blockchain applications for your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Could you rephrase it?
Um, Basically, I mean, how does StealthTest stay ahead of the curve and
Yeah.
prioritize scalability and recoverability?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're keeping up with, the blockchains as they kind of technologically evolve, right? Like none of these public blockchains that we specifically kind of deal with are
Mhm.
static, right? They're going to continue to evolve because they need to keep up with market conditions. They need to attract new users. They need to get faster and cheaper, and they need to scale, right? And this is kind of those are the three kind of pillars of blockchain. You can't have them all, but you can
Mhm.
specialize in at least two of them. And I guess with respect to Ethereum in particular, since that is really, in my opinion, where most of the network value has accrued so far and will continue to accrue in the future, especially as it relates to continued development of blockchain-based applications. Um, the Ethereum Foundation continues to innovate and
Mhm.
push the boundaries of the Ethereum virtual machine in ways that are really astounding and impressive. And it's incumbent upon us again to make sure that we're keeping up to date with that, so that we can move our product forward as the Ethereum Foundation and the core team of devs move these public blockchains forward.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I was reading your bio and I understood that creator economy is one another area of interest that you have. And creator economy is gaining a lot of fuel in the Web3 world, as I'm sure marketing and advertising bases up with this space. So, how does your passion with blockchain tech tie into empowering creators while ensuring their safety, security, and privacy, and at the same time ensuring the privacy, security, and the needs of clients who would, let's say, be dealing with these creators? And we also need to keep in mind that Web3 creators are not like your regular Web2 creators. I mean, there would be people who wouldn't have names or faces, just numbers, or maybe JPEG avatars. So, how do you maintain a balance or strike a balance between the needs of the creators and the employees?
Yeah, the crypto industry is certainly known for its pseudonymity and
Notorious.
pseudonymous personalities, right? Or even anonymous personalities. There's quite a few of those as well. Yeah, so the creator economies that Web3 really enables is something that was really kind of one of the biggest reasons why I got into Web3 on a full time basis several years ago. I viewed it as something that was, really kind of a game changer, especially for, the individual artist, whether it's, traditional art, music, etc. Um, New ways to kind of directly reach out to their fan base, interact, continue to reward through
Mm,
experiences, and then all the while, hopefully, kind of retain a bit of ownership in what they've created by way of these royalties. Right now, the royalty system has unfortunately taken a bit of a turn, given what platforms like OpenSea have recently announced, right, where they're backing away from creator royalties. However, I still view this as a fundamental component of Web3's value, and I think that over the years we'll see a return to creator royalties as being a really big focus, especially if from a technical level we can figure out ways to ensure that creator royalties get paid in a permissionless on-chain way, which is something that we don't have right now, right? Which is why OpenSea is able to just you know turn that feature off basically, or give NFT buyers the optionality to put in how much they think the creator should earn from the resale of an NFT, right?
mm,
Which is very much kind of counterintuitive to why these systems were set up in the first place.
absolutely.
Um, so I think that's really important. And on the security aspect, again, um, whether you're a really big traditional artist that's been doing things for a really long time, or you're a brand new digital artist who is, experimenting with all these new tools and developing kind of a growing fan base of your own. I think
Hmm.
making sure that your assets, your data, in and in this instance, I think the art that you create, whatever it may be, is protected, is really fundamental. And we offer that protection via private testing environments.
Absolutely. And since we're running almost towards the end of our time, I think the last few of my questions would be what you're expecting from this space. But before that, you did mention that you have been involved in educating people. So, while you were sort of educating people about security and privacy in this space, what were some of the key challenges that you faced, and what were some of the most notable observations that you made about education regarding the Web3 crypto space that you found in, let's say, beginners or people who are just starting to get into the space?
Sure. So, for folks just starting to get into this space, there is a learning curve associated with Web3 that can be fairly daunting. Um,
Mm.
Blockchain technology is something that is more often than not not easily explainable to anybody. They probably need some sort of foundation to understand, a lot of these concepts. And
Yeah.
so, being able to kind of like form uh, non-blockchain analogies is something that I've kind of utilized over the years in order to kind of create exemplars about how the technology works and what it
Mm.
can do and why it's valuable and why it will continue to be more valuable in the future. And I think from again the regulatory and policy side, one of the biggest obstacles we've seen so far is, especially here in the United States, is a lack of a of agreed upon legal framework um, to govern digital assets and blockchain technology, and that's really been the big challenge so far. And I think that's why getting this regulatory and policy piece right as soon as possible is probably the most important thing for this industry as a whole, because the longer we go without having this framework in place, I believe the longer that most of the large traditional Web2 enterprise companies will remain on the sidelines, and they will continue this wait and see approach in
Mm.
order to kind of mitigate their risk and ensure that they're not going to run afoul of the whims of a regulator or something of that nature, right? And what we really need is everyone in this space experimenting and trying new things and pushing the technology forward and testing its boundaries. That's really what's important. We need people actively developing and experimenting, and you know everything that is an impediment to that is an obstacle that we need to solve.
Couldn't agree more. Experimenting and developing is most definitely the key to sort of success in the Web3 space.
Mhm.
Lastly, Colin, as we stand on the brink of this sort of shift from Web 2 to Web 3 that has been talked about now a bit too much, in fact, in media, what in the future of security and privacy within the Web 3 ecosystem excites you the most? You can also talk about trends that users should be eyeing in the coming few years.
Sure. So, I think one of the most important things that I'm excited about is something that we've recently dipped our toe into, which is account abstraction via a recent or a recent Ethereum upgrade called 4337. And I think it's going to really provide ways in which to onboard large amounts of kind of mainstream adoption and bring in millions of additional users to Web3 without the complexities of having to know how to spin up your own non-custodial wallet, how to manage keys, how to sign transactions and having to be kind of exposed to all of the security risks and technicalities around these non-custodial wallets. So account abstraction is something that I think is going to play a really big role in the coming years.
Absolutely, and really exciting times coming up for all of us in the Web3 crypto blockchain space. And I think we're almost at the end of our time. This was a really exciting episode with Collin Woodward from StealthTest, and your insights were extremely valuable, Collin, and the sort of things that you said today about privacy, security, and laying stress upon how this is really important, not just for people who have been in this space, but most importantly for beginners, and stressing upon the importance of testing, developing more, and doing your own research. Really great points were made during today's session. Thanks again, Collin, for your wise words and joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure was ours, and would love to give a big shout out to Collin and StealthTest. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you to our viewers for joining us today. We'll see you next time, same place, and we'll hope to have Collin again on one of our shows to talk about security, privacy, and how to safeguard those. Thanks again.
Thank you.